Around 5 years ago, Prager University posted a video entitled Feminism 2.0. As per usual, it ran at about 5 minutes and featured a prominent conservative thinker. The video quickly went viral amongst online right-wing circles and earned itself nearly 2 million views. We should note that this barely breaks into PragerU's top 50 in terms of view count. So if by the end of this video you think 2 million is too much, wait until you discover what else they have to offer. Before we get on to our analysis of this Feminism 2.0, let's talk about PragerU. Prager University is a YouTube channel created in 2009 by Dennis Prager, a conservative radio talk show host. Unfortunately, it's not just any old harmless argumentative channel. No, PragerU is much more than that. In their own words, they are a non-profit organization that aims to promote what is true, good, excellent, and noble through digital media. Their mission is to take the best ideas from the best minds and distill those into 5-minute videos. They base their views on Judeo-Christian values, love for America, the free market, and free speech. Now, that's how they describe themselves. But one look at their video history will show you how far PragerU runs right. Fossil fuels is the greenest energy. Make men masculine again, why you should love fossil fuels, and if you love freedom, thank the British Empire. These are just some of the absolute gems you'll find, and their titles alone should give you a pretty clear indication of how ridiculous their content is. So hopefully, now, if you didn't before, you'll have a slight sense of what PragerU is about. If you're still unsure, well, I would describe it as a far-right YouTube channel and fake university funded by billionaires to promote bigoted ideas and spread their absurd and unethical worldviews to millions of ill-informed people. Right, let's move on to Tammy Bruce and her revolutionary New Feminism.
I want to talk to you about a new feminism for the 21st century. There are 3 pillars to this new feminism: dignity, the word no, and men. That's right, men. But before I expound on these 3 ideas, you need to know something about me.
I'm going to stop the video here to say that I'm not going to criticize Tammy Bruce as a person or her personal record. This video isn't an ad hominem, it's a critical analysis of her ideas. However, I will give you a quick background on who she is and what she's done, because her own summary is a bit short. Tammy Bruce was elected president of the Los Angeles National Organization for Women, the NOW, from 1990 to 1996. Then she sat on the National Board for Directors before being censored and effectively kicked out for what the rest of the board called racially insensitive comments. She created and hosted her own syndicated show, The Tammy Bruce Show, and she's written articles for the LA Times, the NYT, Esquire, and even worked on Schwarzenegger's transition team and is currently working on a PhD in LA.
So in that spirit, let's talk about the first pillar of this new feminism: dignity. Dignity is at the core of what feminism should always be about. Dignity means that a woman should be able to freely choose her own path in life.
Now, this is going to be a recurring source of disagreement between Bruce and I. She's just made 2 statements which both she and I agree on completely. Dignity is and should be at the core of feminism, and women should, in fact, be able to choose freely their path in life. So where's the disagreement, you may ask? Well, like many problems in the world, it's a question of semantics. How Bruce interprets the word dignity is based on her own subjective definition of the value, which will always be linked in intricate ways to other values she holds. We'll talk more about this later on in the video when she goes ever so slightly more in depth on the topic.
That's what feminism once held. But does it still? Ask almost any female college student today what she aspires to be, and she'll list any number of career choices. The one she won't list is wife and mother.
Right off the bat, Bruce argues that women should be allowed to look forward to being mothers and wives, to aim to be one. She believes women are disregarding these choices to instead aspire to become journalists, engineers, lawyers, etc., etc. Bruce demonstrates a misunderstanding of basic feminist beliefs. And hold on to that because it's a reoccurring issue. Bruce equates being a mother and a wife, aka a family role, with that of a career role. Now, the great majority of feminists see nothing wrong with the wish to become a partner or a parent. In fact, tons of prominent feminists were and are both of these. Women like Betty Friedan, who started the NOW Tammy Bruce worked for. Actually, she did both. But, to be fair, her argument touched on today's world. Our corrupt and senseless society where college women don't want to have kids or find love. They just rot away, cut off from the world, and content somewhere in a New York City flat. No, birth rates amongst college graduates haven't dropped to zero. And every woman with a college degree isn't a man-hating troll in their skyscraper. Let's take motherhood as an example. What Bruce is misunderstanding is that women today view motherhood as a characteristic that shouldn't define them above all else. A lot of women want to be more than their biological traits make them out to be. More than a walking womb waiting for a man to swoop in. What the feminist movement has been advocating for is that the reproductive ability of a woman be part of the woman's identity, but just one part, alongside various other traits that can only be described as non-gendered, such as the ability to become a journalist, for example, if they so please. It's not about women becoming single, motherless CEOs as Bruce would like you to believe. Instead, it's about recognizing that women shouldn't be limited to motherhood and wifehood. They have every right to aspire to a career like men do, and have that be separate from their aspirations to becoming mothers or partners. Being a mother or a wife has been at the core of women's identities for millennia now. It's been preventing them in a lot of cases from being seen as anything but that. Feminism doesn't aim to bully women out of motherhood. Rather, its objective is to expand the sphere of women's identity to reflect more than their biological role.
Anytime someone has the temerity to suggest that a woman might want to look for a husband while in college, as a very successful Princeton grad recently did in a letter to the school's newspaper, feminists go nuts.
The case Bruce mentions is that of Susan Patton, who in 2013 wrote a letter to the editor in Princeton's student newspaper. I've read the letter a few times now, and I can best describe it as an elitist rant about supposed superiority of Princetonian men and how absolutely stupid and thick every guy outside her university is. As one of the comments put it, Patton's rant is shallow and one-dimensional. Her personal views would set the movement of women's liberation back decades. Personally, I couldn't agree more with smart guy. Patton has this hyper-focus on intelligence as the only trait women should look for in men, believing that there's essentially no other place or time in their life when Princeton students will ever find such a concentration of men who are worthy of you. What a ridiculous thing to say to everyone outside of Ivy League schools. The idea that doing well in high school, which is technically the only thing that gets you to these top universities, that is if your parents aren't loaded with cash and a corrupt sense of ethics, correlates to intelligence, is preposterous. But more than this, Patton misses the mark on the fact that college isn't Tinder for the well-off and students in debt. It's a place to learn, live life, and get a degree. It's whatever you want it to be, not what Susan Patton wants it to be for you. Once again, by mentioning this case, Bruce misses an opportunity to see that women can be defined by more than their partner. Once again, by mentioning this case, Bruce misses an opportunity to see that women can be defined by more than the partner they choose and their life as a wife or a mother. That's the great thing about feminism. It doesn't impose any goals or rules on you. It just aims to free you from the shackles of any societal expectations and pressures so you can make an unrestricted and free choice about your life.
A new feminism will value and respect all responsible choices.
Very quickly here, I'd like to point out the use of the word responsible. In this instance, Bruce uses the word responsible in its purely subjective sense. So who defines what is responsible? Is it Tammy Bruce? Dennis Prager? WikiHow writers? It sounds to me like Bruce is setting her own definition of what is a responsible choice and putting it forward as what is right. Doesn't sound like letting women freely choose their own path to me, Tammy!
And while we're talking about dignity, I can't think of anything less dignified for women than the feminist belief that in the sexual arena, women are like and therefore ought to act like men. Is this what the truly liberated woman wants? To have casual sex and think nothing of it like men do? That's what feminism aspires to?
Hell yeah, Tammy! Group 3.5 billion people into a single clique of mindless, sex-driven animals. Apparently, total apathy towards sex is a common characteristic of men, and women are aspiring to it. It's just silly and outdated to think that all and only men go around having casual sex without care. Both women and men have sexual needs, libido, and for centuries have been taking care of it in various ways, be that abstinence, masturbation, casual sex, or relationship sex. It's all okay to do, and her argument that it isn't dignified once again plays on her own subjective view of the word dignity. Bruce puts forward this need for women to be calm, serious, and collected, to act in a way that leads to her, specifically, respecting that woman's action. But subjectivity isn't a valid argument, and unfortunately for Bruce, she and I have very different definitions of what is and isn't dignified. The way she portrays men as undignified and apathetical sexual addicts isn't fair or balanced, or even TMCR.
So let's add this up. Feminism has downplayed the desire for women to have a family, while at the same time hyping the rewards of career and casual sex.
When I look at Tammy Bruce's summary, the first thing that comes to mind is her phrase from earlier: women should choose their own path in life. Bruce seems to be confused between her wish for women to have free reign over their lives and her idea of what is dignified, what she thinks women should do. Feminism hasn't downplayed the desire for women to have a family or hyped the rewards of career and casual sex. It's simply taken the focus off of motherhood and wifehood as defining characteristics of women. Feminists throughout history have advocated and fought for women to be more than just that, to be able to choose to be a lawyer with a partner and 7 children, or a married humanitarian worker with none, to be a single mum doctor who has casual sex on weekends, or a journalist who wants neither marriage nor kids. And the point is, it's all fine. Whether Tammy Bruce finds it dignified or not doesn't really matter. What matters is women are free to choose to be what they want, to be defined by what they wish to define them, and that's where the crux of all this lies. Tammy Bruce seems conflicted. I think she genuinely wants women to be free of men's grasp and influence, but at the same time, she fears what total freedom might do to women. Bruce wants to free women from the shackles of patriarchy, only to introduce them to the ropes of Brucearchy and her antique definition of dignity.
The second pillar of a new feminism is the word no. It's very much tied in with the first pillar. Throughout history, women have made great use of the word no.
No.
Of course, many times women said yes when they should have said no, and that's the basis of more than a few classic stories and novels. But this was the exception, not the rule. There is great power in that word no, and women, for the most part, knew how to wield that power. But in the last few decades, they've lost it, and the consequences have been catastrophic.
Would you believe me if I told you her worst arguments are still to come? Bruce puts forward her idea of the word no as a tool that women have used throughout history to resist unfair treatment and subjugation, or at least that's what is implied, because she isn't entirely clear as to what she means by great power. So unfortunately, because of her lack of clarity, we'll have to make an educated guess and assume that this is what is meant by it. And frankly, I'm a bit lost. Does Bruce seriously think that women resisted injustice by saying no all these years? Is she trivializing the hundreds of years of revolutionary action and disobedience by women? Or does Bruce really think that women who previously could not legally accuse their husbands of rape or assault if they refused to engage in sexual activity and were forced upon, were armed with the powerful weapon of saying no? Because marital rape only became illegal in the 1990s in the UK and the US, and I'm sure plenty of women were fighting for this cause a long time before it. Resistance through speech is indeed a useful tool, but Bruce seems to think that women before feminism had complete control over their lives by simply stating their refusal of certain parameters of society. How fucked up is her understanding of history? Sure, there's been women in positions of power or civilizations that have done away with patriarchal hierarchies, but for the most part, history has been dominated by men. Political, economic, and oftentimes cultural power has been single-handedly put into, well, the hands of men in most societies. In the UK, being your wife only became a punishable offence in 1853. The first woman allowed to study at university was in 1880. First architect, 1898. First policewoman, 1914. And abortions only became legal in 1967. So no, Tammy, women very obviously didn't have the power you think they did. Society still determined their basic rights and undermined them until very recently. The word no didn't mean shit. Women had to endure terrible hardships throughout history and fight for their rights generation after generation. The word no wasn't a magical weapon that they could brandish at every ill treatment. If they did, the world often reacted apathetically. And thinking this way kind of romanticizes the past in a way that's frankly a little bit dangerous. It legitimizes the way that women were treated before feminist movements made strides in liberating women. So, to sum this up, women were not more powerful than they are today. In fact, while there is still a lot to do in the field of gender equality, women today arguably have it better than at any other point in history. In fact, their refusal, their no, actually holds some real power today, unlike in the past you so cherish, where women underwent abuse and oppression at every turn, even when they held up their hands and said their piece.
Women who fought not to be treated as sex objects have become more objectified than ever. You see it everywhere, in music videos, on billboards, in the hookup culture on campuses.
So this 10-second point, which Bruce doesn't really expand on, is probably the only half-decent argument she makes. The question of liberation versus sexualization is still a heavily contested one with provoking arguments on a lot of sides. Are women taking control of their bodies and using it how they wish to, without being held back by archaic societal rules and norms? Or are they being pushed to over-sexualization by a patriarchal system that promotes it? These questions tie into a long range of other topics like consumerism, capitalism, commodification, and overall contains enough content for me to dedicate an entire video to. Which I might if you all would be interested in seeing it, but for today, we'll just give Bruce half a point for bringing up a half-decent point that she knows for a fact would take close to an hour to discuss on its own. Well played, Tammy, well played.
And now we have the tawdry spectacle of teenage girls sexually pursuing teenage boys the way boys pursued girls. How did this happen? Because feminism began to advocate that women should behave like men. Whatever men did and however they did it, that's what women should do. Feminists were angry at men, but they wanted to be like them at the same time. No wonder our society is so confused.
Now, why would you bring up and demonize bodybuilding or smoking weed? There's no ancient or recent godly law that says women shouldn't smoke up or lift weights. For someone who appears hell-bent on preserving her freedom, Tammy doesn't seem to want that for others. Once more, we come upon the idea of subjectivity, of what Bruce sees as a characteristic of a female gender role versus the perspective of others. If a woman wants to bodybuild, just bloody let her. What are you going to do? Get the state to interfere and prohibit them from going to the weights section so they can be dignified Brucean women? One of the main reasons feminism is such a heated topic of debate is precisely because people like Tammy Bruce misrepresent the views and beliefs of feminist thought. Of course, there's a variety of strands of feminist thought, but amongst the sometimes muddled bulk of viewpoints, there are in fact quite clear and established beliefs and goals. Bruce claims that one such aim is that women and men should behave the same. Whatever men did, that's what women should do. This is a bit foolish, and it shows once more Bruce doesn't really understand the position she's arguing against. As we've stated before, the goal of feminism isn't to have everyone behave the same, but rather to take away the roles imposed by societal norms, which in themselves determine what a person can do. It's not about making everyone into men, but instead, break down the gender roles so that everyone can be free to express themselves in whatever way they wish to.
Women are robbing themselves of the ability to say no. The solution is to take that power back. This is especially true for young women.
No.
Saying no means I will not be defined by anyone else, not by feminists, and not by men's sexual desires. That is female power.
Well, a minute has gone by since she tried defining her no pillar, and there she goes, already changing its meaning. Apparently, her pillar is now meant to empower women to define themselves. But anyways, it baffles me Bruce doesn't see the irony in her saying women shouldn't be defined by anyone mere seconds after passing judgment on what some choose to do, calling it confused or undignified. I feel like it always comes back to this notion of Tammy Bruce having a really clear and personal definition of what a woman is, and finding herself torn between wanting to let women define themselves, but also not wanting them to turn out to be pot-smoking, horny bodybuilders. Which is fine, that's the point, you're free to be what you want to be. Tammy can't tell you to do shit.
This is a good segue to my third pillar of a new feminism, men.
Now we come to my absolute favorite part of the video. It's so ridiculously stupid and hilarious that, I don't know, I shouldn't even be doing commentary on it, because you'll see, it does my job for me. But I'm still gonna.
It is easy for feminists to forget this, but it was men who gave up their monopoly on political power and gave women the right to vote. Men who invented birth control, the refrigerator, the washing machine, and so many other devices that liberated women.
So in perhaps what is Bruce's most controversial segment, she outlines three main arguments in her defense of why men should be and are an integral part of women's lives and liberation. A claim that, personally, I've not really heard many people dispute. Bruce argues that feminists are quick to forget that 1. Men gave up their monopoly on political power and gave women the right to vote. 2. It's men that invented birth control. 3. Men liberated women through technological advances. This part, I'm gonna admit, didn't really make me laugh. It just makes me a bit sad for Tammy. She so quickly dismisses any influence women have had on the pill, on universal suffrage, on technology. Nowhere does she mention the fact that men were forced to give women the right to vote after hundreds of years of feminist movements, after people like Emily Davison, the Pankhursts, and Susan B. Anthony dedicated their lives to this fight. But to Bruce, none of this matters, because in the end, the people in power that so graciously gave up that power are the ones to thank. In the words of a good friend of mine, sexual discrimination should have never existed. You don't get a cookie for ending it. Of course, some men throughout history have fought for equal rights, but limiting social advances to men did it is quite demeaning to the countless movements and women who struggled, often fruitlessly, for change. In her example of the pill, Bruce completely sidesteps the fact that while it's true that Gregory Pincus invented the pill, he would have never had the idea or financial support without people like Margaret Sanger and Catherine McCormick, two leading figures in the history of the pill. What about the Malthusian League, the Knowlton trials, Eleanor Roosevelt, Aletta Jacobs, and the fact that the male-drafted Comstock laws banned even information on birth control, with the punishment of 5 years of hard labor until the 1920s? The role of women is simply undeniable in the creation and politics of the pill. Of course, some men have had a role in it too, but the point is, depicting the struggle as one fought by a single group or sex is plain silly, when in reality the pill harbors a complex and long history that stretches far across the globe. Bruce's argument ends in a view that it is men who liberated women through technological advancements. But to quickly go over this, the first refrigerators were created between 1913 and 1927, meaning these were times women did not yet have the level of accessibility to studies, funding, etc. that they may have had today, making it almost impossible for women to have had the same webs of support than the men who created these tech wonders. In addition to this, the point isn't to cut down chore time for women. That isn't really true liberation. Real liberation for women would come when the sexes mutually come to an understanding that housework isn't a woman's job. And likewise, the role of women isn't to serve men. They are conscious, free individuals and should be treated as such.
And men are different from women. Academics like to speculate that men and women are basically the same, that they're only socialized differently.
Throughout all the studies and the hours of research that I've done for this video, never have I seen a single claim by academics that men and women are the exact same. No sane person would deny that there exists biological and physiological differences between the sexes. However, it is true that the way we are socialized, cultural norms, parenting behaviors, and other factors have a measurable effect on our behavior and character, just like being born male or female will have a measurable effect on a person. Bruce cites a study by Bobby J. Carruthers and Harry T. Rice, Men and Women Are from Earth, Examining the Latin Structure of Gender, a study from 2012 by the two American psychologists. Just because I like to, and not because I don't trust Bruce, I went and read it for myself, because, alright, who trusts PragerU to correctly read and interpret an academic study? Well, lo and behold, Bruce is either a manipulative liar, or didn't understand what she read. I know this because even the study's introduction states its point. Average differences between men and women are not under dispute. From the get-go, the authors of the study explain that the differences between the sexes are not the source of dispute. Rather, they're attempting to figure out whether it's more accurate and helpful to scientists to look at differences between men and women as taxonomical or as dimensional. Taxonomy is a practice of classification that sees things differ in a binary way. However, a dimensional way of classifying data would set the observed characteristics on a scale. For example, you could ask, from a taxonomical point of view, is the soup hot or cold? There are only two possibilities, and sometimes it so happens that that's the most efficient way of asking the question. In comparison, though, if you ask whether the soup is hot or cold from a dimensional point of view, then your answer will be set on a sort of scale, a degree. So the authors of the study aren't proposing that men and women, or males and females, are the same, as Tammy Bruce suggests. They are actually acknowledging the fact that there are differences and studying the best way to classify them. I genuinely don't think you need a sociology degree to understand this, as it's clearly defined in the first and even final pages of the paper. So this brings me back to my original point. Either Tammy didn't understand what she was reading, or she's consciously lying. And unfortunately, something else she did makes me think the latter is correct. I searched throughout the entire paper for the quote she used, and it simply doesn't exist. Even if you count the ellipses, these strings of words just do not exist in the study. This leads me to conclude that, well, not only did Tammy Bruce, a PhD student, knowingly misuse a scientific study, but she also fabricated a quote and attributed it to the researchers that undertook the study. I know this isn't a published paper from her, or in a scientific journal, it's just a YouTube video she's made, but it's still not a great look for an academic, is it?
But as George Orwell famously noted, that's an idea that only an intellectual would be foolish enough to believe.
This pains me so much you have no idea. For one of my favorite authors, a lifelong leftist who put his life on the line to fight alongside anarchists, Marxists, and socialists in Spain, who's written entire books full of Antifa and anti-authoritarian ideas, to be instrumentalized in this way by far-right thinkers, it really hurts. But enough about me and my fragile heart. Let's talk about Tammy and her even fragiler quote. Okay, let's just talk about her using fake quotes again. But this time, in her defense, she didn't make this one up. She found it online and didn't fact check it to make sure it was real. And not something created by, I don't know, some 50-year-old conservative mum who hosts a right-wing inspirational quote Facebook page. I did a little Googling and found that the quote indeed is fake. However, it does resemble another quote from Orwell. One has to belong to the intelligentsia to believe things like that. No ordinary man could be such a fool. Which, to be fair, is pretty similar to the quote Bruce brought up, although that in no way clears her from wrongdoing. And yet, if you go and check Notes on Nationalism, published in 1945, where the real quotes originates from, you'll quickly realize Orwell was in fact not referring differences between men and women. Actually, he was talking about an entirely different debate. He argued it was foolish to believe that American troops during World War II had been sent to Europe, not to fight the Germans, but to crush an English revolution. Now, Tammy, that's pretty far off the whole feminism debate, so maybe next time, don't make up fake quotes from leftist authors to try and garner imaginary support for your arguments. Just use real ones, from your side of the political spectrum even.
Moreover, the sexes need each other. For example, women civilize men. It's what we're supposed to do.
I don't know about you guys out there, but I don't like the idea of a woman using her black magic to disintegrate my rock shirts and cut my hair. In what world does a person who has worked with feminist movements like Bruce seriously believe that civilizing men is a task naturally conferred to women? It's such a disgustingly reductive position towards both genders. She argues men need to be civilized, basing her proposition on the premise that men are what? Barbaric savages that don't know how to be polite or civil, and then at the same time says it's the job of women to take care of this imaginary issue. I swear we're not all incels waiting for a strong woman to come and clean us up. Some of us even manage to cook or shave sometimes.
But in order to accomplish this critical task, we must preserve our dignity, not be afraid to use the word no, and see men as partners, not as competitors, let alone oppressors. That's the way to a new feminism and the way to a better world for both sexes. I'm Tammy Bruce for Prager University.
So, in conclusion, My whole YouTube feed is now PragerU videos and other far-right bullshit because of how many times I've had to watch and rewatch and rewatch and rewatch and rewatch and rewatch this sad excuse of a class. Thankfully, YouTube's algorithm should probably quickly pick up the fact that that was a one-time thing and go back to suggesting sweet old chill-hop songs to listen/study to. In all seriousness though, let's go through Tammy Bruce's summary. It's really bizarre when you think about it because on face value, I agree with everything that's written here. In fact, I'm pretty sure most, if not all of you watching this, agree with it too. But because Bruce has perverted each of these points with ideological stupidity, she's completely derailed each argument. Bruce views the word dignity through her own lens of what it means to be dignified, a term that ends up being less about choosing your own path in life and more about walking along this conservative utopian trail that Tammy Bruce has crafted for you, where weed and casual sex and going to the gym aren't for women, but being a stay-at-home mom that never uses her college degree, that is. She then went on to warp thousands of years of human history through this weird idea that women had more power in the past, in particular through verbal disagreements. Because, yes, let's just forget that one part of history where women had no say in politics, couldn't choose who they married, and were basically a group of walking wombs. Oh wait, that's almost all of history. And finally, to close it all off, Tammy Bruce dismisses all achievements made by women to instead give the medals for socio-political liberation to men. Again, maybe read a history book, Tammy. I've got a feeling those PragerU history videos, they're not that great. I honestly find it fascinating though how Bruce manages to up the cringe meter on this video with every new pillar. What's even worse though is the comment section. It's just as toxic as you'd imagine. Well folks, this video has gone on for long enough already, so I hope you've enjoyed going through what seems to be the best that PragerU and the far right have to offer against the sick-ass logic and facts of actual feminism. If there is another video from Prager University or any other laughably bad channel that you'd like me to have a look at, please leave it in the comments below. Don't be afraid to also let me know what you thought of this first debunking attempt, and leave all your love in there too. Just please, for the love of God, don't misquote George Orwell.